It's 7 o'clock on Wednesday, March 5th, and I'll call the Finance Committee meeting to order. This meeting is being recorded. It is a hybrid meeting. I have with me in the room from the Finance Committee, Tom Parkins, Peter Twining, Maury Creighton, Dean Nahadas, Andy Olderman, myself, Sarah Mellish. I expect that Gar Morse will be joining us shortly. The first item, we're going to alter the items on the agenda because Dan Sherman has a commitment for another meeting, so we're going to do Dan Sherman, the auditor, on the OPEB first, and then we'll do the town audit. Dan, can you hear us?
I can hear you just fine, thank you.
Great.
Good to be with you.
It's all yours.
Okay, I assume everybody has my 2024 report.
Yes.
And I will go through that starting on page 3. And the long-term assumption that we're using for the investments is 7.5%. And in the fiscal year ending in 24, you beat that by a significant amount. You'll see at the bottom of the table investment income of $407,000. That is $106,000 greater than what was expected. So you had a very good year on the asset side.
Would you say
on the following page, at the top of page 4, you'll see the liability trace from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. And you'll notice that we dropped from $7.165 million down to 6.6. And the reason for that is the experience gain in the middle of that table. You'll see a reduction of $754,000. You had a very good year on experience. For example, if I look at the expected claims cost for the year, at age 64, it only went up 4.3% over the 2-year period between 22 and 24, and we're expecting an increase of closer to 9%. So that was a help. At age 65, it only went up 4.9% versus a 9% increase. But the big nut was on Medicare. The post-65 costs for all active employees and most of the retirees, the Medicare costs and claims costs actually went down about 2% from 22 to 24. So those are the major factors that generated a $754 million gain when we're expecting significant increases in your costs, and essentially it was flat or went down. So the $754 million is a big plus. And you'll see in the middle of that page, in the paragraph at the end, it says you're 69% funded. 2 years ago, or a year ago, you were about 54% funded. So the combination of having an excellent investment return and having lowered healthcare cost increases moved you from just like 54% up to 69%. 69% funded is probably the highest in the state,
Yes.
with the exception, I think, of Wellesley, which went for a pension, or not a pension obligation bond, but an OPEB bond, and they fully funded their obligation, but now they have a big bond debt. So, from my way of thinking, Manchester, I think, is probably at the top of the heap in terms of being funded toward their OPEB liability at 69%. So kudos to you and the town for doing so well on this front. The following page just shows at the top one of the things they asked for in the GASB statements is a trend changes, and you'll see that both on the 1 point higher, 1 point lower, you still are in a great funded position. In the middle of page 5, notice that the OPEB expense is actually a negative number, which means income. So as far as your financials are concerned, you get to record an income of $133,000. A little bit unusual. It goes back to the experience. For example, you'll see that there's an amortization of the experience gain of $500,000. Your earnings have gains of $300,000. You have amortization for that. It's really been a great positive story. At the bottom of that page, you'll see the before and after assets and liabilities. Your liability is down to $2 million, 69% funded, and your liabilities as a percentage of payroll has dropped all the way down to 32%. Again, that is probably leads the state in terms of as the lowest percentage, your lowest liabilities as a percentage of your payroll. Again, an outstanding figure. Following page just goes through the amortizations, reconciliation, and at the bottom of page 6, you'll see an actual determined contribution of roughly $376,000. So and that, by the way, includes just the contribution and includes your pay-go. But I had discussions with Andrea. We talked about different funding, and hopefully, before I jump to that funding, does anybody have any questions on the GASB 7475 portion of the report?
Any questions?
No, just a big smile.
Yeah, pat yourselves on the back. Excellent, very good. So on the funding side, I was asked to take a look at a couple different options as to how you might fund this obligation. And so what I did was came up with a schedule that hopefully you have in front of you or shared with you that I worked with Andrea to put together. And so for fiscal year 25, your plan is to put in about $300,000 above and beyond the pay-go. And I figured out that if you made it $500,000 in 26 and almost $600,000 in 27, you're all done with the unfunded liability. You would be a fully funded system, 100% funded, and from that point forward, you would just have to worry about the normal costs, which you can see in the left-hand column, which is roughly $178,000 at that point. You'd also want to be in a position where if you're only putting in 178 and your pay-go is like 500,000, what it means is that you'll have to set yourself up like the pension program, where the trust receives all the money and it makes all the payments. So the trust would make payments to, the insurance carriers, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Harvard, or whoever is covering your retirees. And you would operate this as if it's a pension program where all the money flows into and out of the trust. And then you can put 178 in. The trust would pay about 478 out, and the invested earnings would cover the difference, and then the assets would continue to grow. So this is one of the schedules. She asked me for a couple of others. We settled on this one at the last iteration. Obviously, lots of other schedules are available, but right now, if you follow this schedule, you'll be fully funded at the end of 27.
I think we were settling on for this year the first option you gave us, which is we've budgeted 330 to go in this year.
Right. So if you do the 330, all that means is at the 27 amount, it'll be closer to maybe 550,000 instead of 590. So you just shift the 30,000 to the end of the schedule. But between now and then, we certainly will do another evaluation for 26, a year and a few months from now, and then you can true up the 27 appropriation to handle any gains or losses or any other events that modify the situation.
Now, Dan, when you say we put all the premiums into this, are you including both active employees and retirees or only retirees?
Only retirees.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, only retirees. You're active, you just keep doing the actives as you have been. This would only be retirees.
Okay. And so I'm looking at this option number 1, which we would have paid off in fiscal '28, which obviously can change based on earnings. So you're saying we pay all the insurance premiums for retirees into this trust, and then how do we figure out how much we take out?
So what you take out is whatever you get for bills from your insurance carrier. So
Okay,
you just direct those payments. The insurance carriers would have to give you an itemized invoice, itemized in the sense they have to separate actives from retirees.
yep.
And those invoices for retirees would be sent to your trust for payment. And if you have difficulty in terms of that, what you'd end up doing was asking the trust to reimburse whatever the town paid back to the town. So you'd have to be like a flow through, if you will. But the payment should come from the trust in some fashion.
And do we have to put in more to the trust than just the amount of the invoice?
Correct. So the
The
pay-as-you-go
normal cost?
the pay-as-you-go column that you see from me is just my estimate of what those invoices will equal.
Okay,
So I'm ballparking it. Obviously, it's going to be different than that because we don't know about, retiree deaths, election of coverage, and so forth. So that'll be a variable in terms of, that column. That's my best guess, and it's only no more than that.
and so we have no more contributions to make at that point in time, other than just the premium
Right.
going in and out?
No, the normal cost.
Okay, we do have to pay the normal cost too, okay.
Yeah, you pay the
Okay.
normal cost. So, for
Okay.
example, it's $179,000 in fiscal year '28. So that money goes in.
Okay.
And so remind me, with this payment schedule, are we now synced to the multi-year design for debt and so forth? In other words, I don't know how to describe that. That schedule that we looked at with the selectmen at the end of the meeting. Does this sync with our we've been doing some adjustments to it, I think, as we move some project debt, I think, further out.
I'm
I
not
don't
sure
know if I'm
whether,
being articulate enough.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
did Greg include OPEB in that spreadsheet being paid out at some?
Yes.
He did. He shows it as
Yeah.
being off the books in a few years, and it actually source.
Yeah, that's
So
the
it is
question.
in
Yeah,
there,
thank you.
so it is in there.
Exactly.
It's showing 630, but it's a line that includes the pension too.
Right.
So
Yeah,
I'm
you
not
know what.
exactly sure what he's
Okay.
included from OPEB. But,
Yeah, what you might want to do is segregate pension from OPEB
yeah,
at this point going forward, so you can keep those straight.
yeah.
So Dan's referring to a payment schedule. I don't have that. I don't know if others do.
It was sent a couple of weeks ago.
Here you go.
What was it sent by Andrea, or who was it sent by?
Who was it sent by? Just a sec.
Because I printed it off quite a while ago.
I just saved it. I don't have who it was sent by. I had the impression it was sent by Andrea, but not sure.
Yeah.
What's the subject line?
Or the date.
I don't know, Maury.
Here, take a look at this.
Is
Yeah,
there
I
a
mean, I
date it
have
was
a hard
sent?
time voting on things, and we don't have information. I'm sorry.
It's on, it looks like maybe
We're not voting right this second.
No, I know, but I mean,
February
sitting here
18th.
listening to stuff. I
February
can't see.
18th?
February 18th.
I don't
Yeah, because I had something on the agenda last week and then we decided we weren't gonna do it.
What's
so
the
this-
factor you use to increase the normal cost?
The normal cost is tied to the expected accrual from each of the active employees.
Right?
So as each employee ages, it's based on the service. If he's got 10 years in now and expect to have 30, then next year will be 11 years out of 30. So there's a 1/30th accrual for that particular employee.
Oh,
So that then each employee has their own factor. It just
I
accumulates.
see.
The underlying increase is probably close to, I'd say, 4.5% per year. But it's not exactly that.
But each employee has, of course, their own accrual.
Right? Each employee has their own accrual. Every single employee and retiree gets valued individually in the system, and then just add up each individual.
Right.
Yeah, so we're tracking option one.
Yes,
Option one.
we had hoped to put more in this year. But because we lost that CMZ grant of $1 million, we needed,
And increased paving costs.
yes,
So is the recommendation for this year 300?
no, 330,
330.
Well,
fiscal year
Oh, yeah, okay,
26.
right.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
that's what's in the budget, yeah.
I was gonna ask the question. My gut is that next year is not gonna be a good year for the stock market. And because of the rotunda expense, I'm concerned about draining the CPC budget all the way because
Okay,
have
wait a minute.
50 grand.
Hold
for
on,
windows.
Dean.
Yeah,
We had Dan Sherman on the phone
Yeah.
discussing OPEB.
yes,
Okay, do you have any more questions on OPEB?
no, other than the investment amount, but we can
But
discuss that later.
we're doing after we've heard from the town accountant also.
I guess one of the questions would be, how do you look at next year, the outlook? Is that in the report?
He's using 7.5% discount interest rate for every year.
Right.
And that's what he's been using.
It's
I
all
think,
loaded,
Dan,
right.
is that what you've used from day one, or did you decrease it at some point?
No, I think at day one, we had to use a 20-year municipal bond rate for high-quality bonds under GASB because you weren't funded. But as soon as you started becoming funded, we switched for 7.5% and been at 7.5% ever since.
Okay.
That was gonna be my question.
I don't quite understand the answer.
Kind of a- And most years we exceed that,
We have.
but there was a couple of years.
I'm kind of with you, Dean. I'm
with
not
next
sure we're gonna
year.
get that this year.
Yeah, but this is off of a long-term,
Right.
and
No,
we don't
yeah.
want to change what's in the,
No, I'm not
Assumptions
suggesting
in
we
the
change
report.
it.
I agree.
I wouldn't be optimistic about the return.
Right. Yeah,
But-
I agree.
Well, if it's less, our numbers will go up a little bit.
exactly, right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to look at page 6 for a second, it actually shows you how you've been doing over the last 5 years. So you just eyeballing it, looks like you've been matching 7.5%. Because you had a couple of good years at 564 and 106 gain. Then you had 3 bad years at 65, 408 to 138. And I bet if you add up that column, it's pretty close to zero. So you've been covering the 7.5% pretty tight.
A nice return. And it is a nice investment. Why we're doing it, but
Right.
I just see money as tight. Although it is every year. Starting to learn.
Okay, so you have any questions of Dan?
No, I do not.
I'm good.
Thank you, Dan. You're off the
You're
hook.
very, very welcome, and thank you for the accommodation on these meetings.
No problem.
I was unaware that I was also supposed to talk to the folks in Franklin until yesterday, so it's a bit of a scramble, and I appreciate the flexibility.
No problem.
All right, take care.
Thanks.
Sure, Dan.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay. So now we're going to do the town auditor's review of fiscal year 24. So the year that ended on June 30th, 24. Audit of the town books.
We ready?
Yes.
So where should I sit? They see me?
You can sit at that
Oh,
chair,
is it
yeah, you can sit in that chair at the
there?
table.
I don't think anyone's there but Rebecca, and Rebecca's with me, so.
But the cameras shift around.
Okay.
There's
Okay.
several.
I didn't want them looking at the back of my head. Good evening. So I think they do have a PowerPoint presentation. If they don't have it up, you have a hard copy in front of you that you can follow through and throw it out.
I'm sorry, who are you again?
Yes, I will. I'll start with that. Renee Davis.
Thank you, Renee.
So Renee Davis with CBIZ CPAs, and
Yes.
on camera with me is Rebecca Gamsby. She also worked on the audit. So I was the partner on the audit. Rebecca was, I'm going to say, the manager on the audit, although the names are changing around a little bit, and I'm going to go through that in just a minute. So again, we're here to talk about the results of the 2024 audit. Unfortunately, Andrea is not able to be here tonight, but I think we'll have you covered. What we're going to talk about a little bit is the introduction. Most of you have seen me here before. I've been here for several years under Powers and Sullivan.
I was gonna say the name change.
The name change. So the name changed twice. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. We'll talk about the audit process, the results of the audit, and of course you have the act for the annual comprehensive financial report in front of you. So we'll walk through a few highlights of that, and I can go into as much detail on that as you want. But we'll start definitely with the name change. So for the past, I was with Powers and Sullivan for almost 30 years. I've been doing this for a long time and have been your auditor for a long time. Last February 1st, Powers and Sullivan merged with a larger national CPA firm named Markham. Markham, on November 1st, merged with CBIZ CPAs. So your financial statements, your 24 financial statements are actually issued under Markham. You won't see that name again. That name is now gone completely, and we're CBIZ. So same team. Rebecca's been doing this audit with me for a number of years. We had the same people out in the field. There's always a new person, like the new staff people, but other than that, same team came out in the field. Basically the same process. The processes do change a little bit over time, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But definitely going forward, it would be under CBIZ CPAs. So I explain a little bit in here, but CBIZ CPAs is associated with CBIZ Inc. CBIZ Inc. is a publicly traded company. So it's an alternative practice structure. So that's why it takes a little bit of sort of understanding how it all works. Large firm, it says in here 11th, I believe now we're 7th in the country. So big national CPA firm. But our little corner of the pie is that we still do local government work. We're now just much larger in New England.
Does the bigger also specialize in municipalities all over the country, or?
So not all over the country. We have a pretty big, so New England. So Little Powers and Sullivan really just focused in Massachusetts. What happened was 2 years ago, Markham actually merged with a company called Melanson. They did a lot in New Hampshire, Vermont. So now what was Markham, what was Melanson, what was Powers and Sullivan, we're all together. The world of CPA firms, either you get private equity or you merge with larger companies. It's been happening quite a bit. So now we have a much larger government practice. Not all over the country, though. No, there's some in New York. We've got a bunch of stuff in Florida, but the biggest piece of it is here in New England. And so our group is still doing the same government audit. But I will say, a bigger firm has, part of the reason for doing this, there are other services that they can provide. So the larger firm, we have our own IT risk assessment people. We have our own actuaries. We have a lot of consultants that can come in and do projects. A lot of our governments wanted additional services, and our little 30-person firm couldn't do that. And there was just the risk becomes too large. Now with a larger firm, we do have a national review process. So your reports went through a national quality control review process. We historically have just done that in-house. We've shifted reports from partner to partner, and they reviewed them. Now it goes up to a national office, and they review the audit to make sure it's going to pass the AICPA guidelines.
Can you hold on, just a moment?
Yep.
I've got Gar Morris from the FinCom on Zoom. Gar, do you have the town audit? He's not responding. Maybe he's a phantom.
I believe he should have gotten it electronically.
Okay.
If he doesn't, Rebecca's online, she could send it if we. I don't see it.
We have a number of people online. Well, two. Okay. I'm sorry, keep
You
going.
okay?
Okay.
Review process, though done at a higher level, and the same concept of review and
Yes. Yep, and we're going to talk about that a little bit because it's really set by, we're all following the AICPA standards of what we have to do in an audit. So then I'm going to go right into the objectives of the audit. And really what we do, we as a non-audit service help to put your ACFR together. We help to put this report together. But this report is all Andrea, right? Andrea gives us all the information that goes into this report. Your finance team gives us, so Jen's office, Andrea's office, all the information comes out of SoftWrite, comes out of your ledgers. We do help to put the information together, but to actually audit and give our opinion on it, we have to do a risk assessment. So the whole point in the audit is for us to be able to opine on your financial statements and have a clean audit opinion, which you did, again, so
on the information that we give.
that you give. So you own the statements. We help to put them together. We give a draft to management. Andrea reviews them. She knows all of the groupings. All we're doing is really grouping your information and putting it in this format. The transmittal letter comes from them. The OPEB information comes from Dan Sherman. The pension information comes from Essex Regional Retirement System. And, somebody was asking earlier when Dan was on, I like that Dan kind of went before us. It kind of good segue. But how does everybody have their own little OPEB liability? And that's called the census data. So Dan gets information from the town of all of your employees and what health insurance plans they're in and their age and their role, because, depending on their date of hire and their role, the liabilities can change. What we do to audit that is we test the census information. So we test the information that you, as the town, gave to Dan that he used to come up with those numbers.
Accuracy.
And same with the retirement system. You give them, it's a little bit different with pension because it's more payroll based, but you give them all of your people, all of their payroll information. We test to make sure you're deducting the right amount. We don't test all of them, we test a sample, make sure that information is accurate. Because bad information going over to Essex Retirement would mean bad liability. So we're following government auditing standards, really auditing standards generally accepted in the United States and government auditing standards, which we call Yellow Book standards. And our responsibility is to plan and perform the audit to obtain reasonable but not absolute assurance on the fair presentation of your financial statements. Again, we're doing a pretty detailed risk assessment of what could go wrong with your numbers, and then we test based on that risk assessment. And management is responsible for the information in the financial statement. So Andrea's group has to get the draft reports, review it, they ask questions, we make edits and go back and forth until everyone's comfortable with the numbers. And page 8, we'll talk about the timing of it. So this year, we merged twice, right? So the reports did go out by the end of January, so they went to the GFOA on time. But it was a little bit of a different process just because we were going through a lot. But what we have to do is come in and document your internal controls. So management is responsible for making sure you have a good system of internal controls over the information in your ledger. Is cash being reconciled between the treasurer's office and Andrea's office? Is the cash supported by real numbers that are in the investments? For OPEB, we're making sure that number is verified. That you have strong controls over departmental collections. Now, we're not looking so much at the small stuff, it's the big stuff. What is the risk that something of significance could go wrong in your financial statements? So we document your controls, who does what here, and then we test based on that risk.
And does your engagement include some comment to us about our internal controls being adequate and so forth?
So there's not an assurance on internal controls. What we have to report to you is any significant deficiency or material weakness in controls, and there were none. So we're also looking for compliance with grant requirements. This year, you did not need a single audit, so you didn't reach the $750,000 threshold for federal spending. So there was no, last year, we had an alternative procedures report because of the ARPA money. You didn't reach that threshold this year, so there was no separate single audit report. And of course, it says in here, but the liability related to pension, OPEB, we do that all as part of our interim work leading up to the year-end audit. The year-end audit work is when we're actually putting together the financial statements and we're checking more cutoff. Is cash adequate? Have you recorded your payables? So like, well, what could go wrong in a government is timing of payables. If someone's under a very tight budget and they hold invoices and don't pay them, that could be a problem and misstate your financial statements. So we test your cutoff procedures. Some of the things that you only do once a year, like capital assets, sick and vacation accruals, things like that, are really what we look at year end to make sure those big liabilities are fairly stated.
And year end is a June 30th.
Year end is June 30th. So we want to make sure those closing numbers, like your budgetary controls, we're looking at the budget at the end of the year to say, how did revenue come in? And then did you have controls? Did Andrea have controls to make sure nobody was able to overspend their budget? And if you were making transfers within budget lines, they were proper. So when we're doing the risk assessment, the AICPA actually tells us what some common risks should be that you almost can't override, right? So management override of internal controls is always a risk. There is a risk that somebody could go in and make adjustments after the revenue is reported or after the warrants have been issued and make adjustments to change something in the financial statement. So we always have to design procedures to test for management override of controls, which really means testing journal entries, having tests of unpredictability. So we're not looking at the same things over and over. We're not asking for the same things. We have to go in and randomly select things that they wouldn't expect us to. So we're looking at the adjusting journal entries, any significant estimates. So, you talked to some of your significant estimates include OPEB. You had a conversation earlier about your discount rate. It is a long-term rate. I agree. We might not make 7.5% this year. We can all maybe agree on that. We'll see what happens. But we're not just looking at 1 year. You're not here to try to time that. It's overall the long term. You have that money invested. You're not planning on using that for anything else. And you've done pretty well over the long term related to that. So we're looking at those for reasonableness. Dan had also mentioned the first year in, you couldn't use a 7.5% rate because you didn't have a good enough track record of funding it. Once you started putting money aside and you had a plan in your budget process to start funding what we called the ARC back then on a regular basis, you could go up. If I went to a community and they were trying to use 7.5% and they weren't funding their ARC, then we might have a problem with giving a cleanup on it. So improper revenue recognition is always considered a risk. What we do to sort of overcome that risk is make sure that we are looking, you are real estate, you're collecting 99% of your real estate taxes in the first year, not a big risk here. Certainly water, sewer, we're looking at those for your controls to make sure you are billing accurately and that you have a good process to collect that money, that it's real money that's collectible at the end of the year. Another issue that's high risk for local governments and it has been a problem in a lot of places is cybersecurity, IT.
Sorry, didn't hear you. What?
Cybersecurity. So, we're looking at what could go wrong with your financial statements. You use SoftWrite as your vendor. So, we do some work to make sure that it's a reputable vendor. None of us are totally protected from cybersecurity. Many of our clients have had issues with cyber attacks, ransomware attacks. Most recently, it's wire transfers going out to fictitious vendors. So somebody emailing with a change of banking information and payments going out to a bad vendor. And the way to prevent that really is having good systems in place, good internal controls in place, but also making sure that you're training your people. Making sure that people know if somebody changes their bank for their direct deposit of their payroll check, that there's a verification process. Same thing with large vendor payments. If you have any big capital projects going on, very commonly vendors try to get in to tell people to change banking information. And those payments can be really large, one payment going to a bad vendor and you're out that money. So cyber insurance. So we actually do, we have a series of checklists. We're not cyber experts, we're accountants. We do have a series of checklists that we have to go through and verify. You use a third-party vendor for your cybersecurity here in the town. You do testing. Again, there's not a guarantee that something can't go wrong, but you have the processes in place to try to prevent that. And as I mentioned up front, really, what we own is the opinion, and it's an unmodified audit opinion, which is historically what you've always had. It's a clean audit opinion. There was nothing that we found in all of our audit work that led us to give anything but a clean opinion on your financial statements. There were no instances of non-compliance that we had to report to you, no other matters that had to be reported to you. And last year, the 2023 financial statements, the ACFR did receive a certificate from the Government Finance Officers Association, the Certificate for Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. This report was also submitted to the GFOA for that award program. And I'll talk a little bit about the financial. So you have, I assume that the people online maybe would have access to this. If it's not on your website yet, and it probably is at this point, it always gets posted to your website. I'm going to assume that it's up there. But we have 126-page financial statement in front of us. So the town chooses to do an annual comprehensive financial report. It's a larger, more detailed report than just your basic financial statements. The basic financial statements are embedded within this report. So the differences between what I'm going to call an ACFR, the comprehensive report, is management gives a transmittal. So management writes the transmittal letters, a transmittal to the town to talk about Manchester by the Sea, your economy, things that are going on, some large projects that you have. And that's the first part of the report. It's not part of the audit. We do read it for consistency, but we don't give an opinion on it on the introductory section. It also has your org chart, your elected officials are listed in that, and so forth. Then the next part, the financial section, is your the audit opinion. That's pages 13 through 15. Again, that's a clean opinion. It's on Markham letterhead this year. So you went from Powers and Sullivan to Markham. Next year will be under CBIZ CPAs. And then the actual financial statements don't start until page 27. So the real financial statements are a smaller part of this. And the financial statements with the notes, and the notes are pretty substantial, go from pages 27 to 78. And then we have RSI, or other required supplementary information, and that's where in the back we have, and I'll show you that in a second, the general fund budget to actual. That's the closest to what you're used to looking at for your budgeted numbers. That'll look very familiar to you. And 10 years worth of retirement trend schedules. And we're getting up to 10 years in OPEB. So when the GASBs first came out, they let you start from year one and build up to 10-year schedules. This is the first year pension. We're at 10 years. OPEB, I think we're probably at 7 or 8 years at this point, but we're getting close. And what that does is it will show you over time how you putting money into that trust fund has really helped to bring down your OPEB liability. Also, because you're doing a comprehensive report, there's combining schedules in the back. So for your non-major governmental funds, all of your like your grants and your revolving funds and so forth, there's more detailed schedules in here to show you, if you have interest, how you're doing in any of those funds. And then the whole back of the report is all statistical. So you have 10 years worth of financial information in the back. That's all the statistical tables. It will give you your tax rates, your debt service, some other key indicators for 10 years, and that's after the last tab in the report. So I'll walk through a few of the financial highlights this year. Your general fund budget was $41.1 million. You do have some financial policies in place. The last I see that they are still draft. I'm not sure I've seen those come out of draft, but we're going with your draft financial policies. If those have not been finalized, it's probably a good idea to get them finalized. But they've been draft for a while, and we're sort of going with the draft policies for now. But your general fund budget is on page 81 to 84. You're at 41.4 million. You budgeted this year to use, so you have policies, your balance was above the policies, so you intentionally brought that down a little bit. You used a little bit of stabilization and a little bit of your general fund to be able to bring that balance down and to be more in compliance with your budget and to help PAYGO to fund some of your capital needs. You had very good budgetary results. Your revenues came in over your budget by $1.3 million. That is typical for you. It's you're conservative in your revenue budget. We think you should be as far as that goes. Expenditures and encumbrances.
And is the source of the 1.3 tend to be consistently? Is there
Does it come from different places?
different places, but is there anyone that stands out?
No, so I will
We've been
say,
talking about how to estimate
well,
going forward.
we can go back to the original conversation. $400,000 of it is investment income. So that this year, same story anywhere you go. You want to budget conservatively for investment income because we really don't know how that's going to come.
900,000 is
So you had 233 was departmental revenue. That can fluctuate from year to year. That could be permits and things of that nature. You budget, so for example, you budget investment income almost at nothing. So I'm on the top of page 81.
what page you on?
81. So your final revenue budget was 34.7 million. All of the categories came in over budget except for intergovernmental is slightly under, and you don't have much control over that. But it's pretty steady across. Investment income's the biggest chunk of that.
Would you be able to, oh, is it okay to ask
Yeah,
a question? Would you be able to is that the amount 1.3 million over? I mean, at first it sounds good, but that's, we could have probably only had a $40 million budget if we had accurately assessed that. So it is important to get it accurate. And I'm wondering, are we accurate? How do we compare in accuracy with other towns?
So I will say you're pretty close. Out of $35 million, you were within 1.2 million, and you don't know when you're coming up with this budget. Right now, you're coming up with your 26 budget. You don't know what investment earnings are going to be for that, right? So you want to stick to the conservative. If things go great the next year, you can vote to use that free cash to offset next year's capital needs. You don't want to get in the habit of using free cash, certainly, to balance your budget, because then when it's not there, you run into trouble. But to help offset some of your capital needs so that you're not borrowing and you're spending money that you have. It's not a bad plan. But what I will show you, if you want to look at how close you are, under expenditures, right, there's not a lot of turnback. So that right-hand column, if you go under revenue, all of the others, these are pretty close. Your budgets are tight. People are spending the money that you have appropriated to them. They don't have a ton even encumbered at the end of the year. There's not big turnbacks. So you need to provide the services that you're providing. People need the money that you're giving. They're not huge. And overall, your expenditures, out of a $39 million budget, they only turned back $233,000. Pretty close. So your general fund, on a budgetary basis, this is without stabilization, actually went down by $580,000. That's a combination of you voted to use your free cash for some capital, and you had a successful budget year, your revenue coming in. So if you net all of that together, it's a net loss of $580,000, which is sort of in line. You wanted to draw down a little bit more, but you had a good revenue year, so that's not a bad thing.
Is the $200,000 number drawn from page 84?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the
I'm looking in the right place.
Yeah, that's the total expenditure, what we call a turn back. So overall, general fund, you had $580,000, I'm going to say budgetary loss there. Not a bad thing. That's what you planned on doing. and then you drew down a little bit on your stabilization fund. So net, the stabilization and the basic general fund go together in one column. Your total general fund, if you combine those two, went down by 950,000.
We've been targeting 8% total.
And you're still over 8%.
I know it said in the
We won't
report
do this next
12%,
year.
but that's, the 12% numbers, when you just look at the town of Manchester's budget, doesn't include school.
Nope, they all include school.
Does it include the excess revenue?
Yeah, so what are you looking at, the 12?
So I thought I saw in here 12%. And
Where are you looking at?
I'm just.
No,
trying to
you
find it.
did.
There was a 12%, and I figured that was probably without the school in
No,
there,
there's-
which would drop it to probably 8.
No, we keep the school is included in with your general fund, so your appropriation to the school. The good thing about having the regional school is you don't have their OPEB liability in your financial statements, right? So that's sort of that keeps your OPEB liability low, but your assessment to the school is included in that.
So the 12% then, so we're trying to figure out what's the delta? Why are we that much higher above percent?
Because we didn't get down in the fiscal year 25 budget. We
This
didn't
is
get down to-
24.
Oh, this is 24. We didn't get down to the 8%.
We weren't, wow.
Yeah, we were because
Well,
of
we
money
were-
that had gone in
See, we-
23.
Our revenues were high by,
Right.
as
That's when
Rita
we
said,
started being
and our
tighter.
expenses were a little higher,
Yeah.
but not enough to offset. So we
Yeah,
ended up
Yeah.
putting more revenue in than we had budgeted, so the free cash went up.
because this budget, that 24 budget, we created in 22.
Right.
End of 22, beginning of 23. So that was before we made the change from
Oh, right.
10% to 8%.
Your policy was between 10 to 12.
Yeah,
All right.
and so
At
that
time.
was like when we just started
Yeah.
really looking at it and really taking it out. I believe for the fiscal year 26 budget, we're going down to 8%.
And if you looked at page
25.
16 of the slides, it actually gets you to that 12%. So I saw the 12% in here too. That is a combination of your free cash and your stabilization funds.
And
Okay,
remember,
all
that
right,
was
so
a- that was
that's
a
the
big thing for Mike
1.6
Pratt.
added
Oh,
on
yeah.
to the free cash.
All
That's
right.
page 6. You said
1.6. This is, we're on this, I bounced to the slides.
Which aren't numbered, but it's,
Yes,
Is it,
Yeah, they
it's
are.
very
Oh.
light.
Very small.
It's very small and very light, but
Lines.
they are numbered.
I didn't bring my microscope tonight.
Sorry.
so-
I got an extra pair of glasses you can tell me.
Well, that's how we're paying for the rotunda, so.
So, so I went forward a little bit. I'm going to back up just to talk about some of the other. So that's your general fund. It's the good thing about this and what the rating, you're AAA rated. What they look at is, are you being intentional about it? Do you have a policy? Are you following your policy? They're fine with you bringing, as long as you're not going too low, that you keep yourself flexible enough financially. They're fine with you bringing it down as long as it's intentional. And if you have a bad year, if you budgeted investment income and it's not there, or something happened unexpected, that you have a plan to get back on track with your budget. So even what we found during COVID, if a community had to use their reserves for, things weren't open, they wanted to keep the senior center open, or, they wanted to be able to fund things, they were okay with that as long as you had a plan to get back on track. And everything you're doing here is pretty intentional.
So is there, because we've been talking a lot about OPEB, we had a plan to, as Sarah mentioned, maybe throw a little bit more than the 330 added this year, but it got used up in other places.
It happened last year too.
Right, and so I'm wondering, given our, the fact that we still, as much as we try, we still come in with this excess revenue that goes down to the general fund. And I'm wondering if we sort of, understanding that predictable pattern, whether we take some from our general fund, dive down below the 8%, pay off OPEB, and recoup the revenue.
We can discuss that later.
Okay.
Okay.
It's a decision.
I just was interested in her.
So what I will say, you agree completely with Dan. You're much better off than most places with OPEB because one, you don't have the school to deal with. They have their own OPEB. They have their own OPEB issue, like you're going to fund that indirectly, but they have their own OPEB fund. You have been putting in what we call the required contribution. Dan comes up with a schedule, you say, yes, we're going to fund it, and you've been doing really good on your investments. So you're in a good position. Most places are not over 80%. Most places are saying when pensions funded, we'll deal with OPEB more. And they're putting in some, but they're not quite there. The only other thing I will add to that, because we see it even with the pension systems, once you get to 100% on OPEB, then you're going to pay your normal costs in every year, right? They're going to take the whole payment out. You're going to pay your normal costs in, like I think it was $175,000. What happens when suddenly you have a bad year or so, the trust can go, you cannot be fully funded. So they say, so we've talked a lot about this with pension, because there's a legal requirement to fully fund the pension. Is the right number 100%? Is the right number 101% or 102%? You don't want to take that completely out of your budget and now you're spending it on something else and all of a sudden you're not fully funded and you have to come up with that. So just something to think about, something to consider. Maybe 100 isn't the right number.
This may be a question I should have asked Dan, but he said Wellesley took out an OPEB bond. One would presume that there's an arbitrage that they're playing with that.
Yeah, so there's a different treatment of it. You have to make sure the interest rates offset.
So they're paying less in the debt service on the OPEB bond that they would have paid to get to be 100%.
Yes.
And then the follow-up to that is being 100% funded, when you get as close as we are, you can have a setback because of investment income.
You can.
So
So
would that
Wellesley
also be a
was,
reason
they were
to kind of-
100% funded on their pension for a while and then, no, they're not.
So would that also be a reason, when you're this close, sort of grabbing for the brass ring and doing the OPEB bond to get there sooner than later?
Not now with rates. So it was, we had a few communities issue pension bonds a couple of years ago, but now it's not, it doesn't work. The
Yeah, we
market doesn't
talked
work.
about it a couple of years ago, we decided we didn't want to.
And you're close in just the way you're doing it right now. Like
Yeah,
you're
we are.
not so.
Just questions.
But I just think something to think about is instead of going down to, we're just going to fund the 175 normal, you may want to have it doesn't have to be the whole amount, but maybe be a little bit more till you say, well, what's our financial policy going to be with OPEB? Is it
Overfunded?
overfunded
Well funded.
slightly, just so that we don't all of a sudden have a budget problem if we have a bad market year?
And that's the 101, 102%.
Gives you a little bit of a cushion.
But you still have the fund, and there's nothing wrong with paying out more than you
That's right.
put in. You just have to make it up in a different year. So if you have a really bad year.
You can be unfunded. You're unfunded now, right? So
Right.
with pension, it's different. With OPEB, you can go back to being not fully
Yeah.
funded for a couple of years until you make it up.
Right.
So
And that doesn't affect some larger sense in terms of AAA or, I mean, there are other
no,
aspects.
you'd be back to, the worst you'd be is back to where you are now, right? So there's no law right now that says you have to fund OPEB. Pension is different.
So this is probably not a cut and dry answer to this question, but if the town's anticipating borrowing more than typically in the next few years, we're already at AAA. We kind of check that box.
Yep.
Is there anything on the OPEB front that we would benefit from on rates, you think, by staying the current course?
I think you're
Paying
better
more.
than most staying the current course. They're looking, Moody's, S&P, they're saying, do you have a fund? Is the fund invested? Are you funding it? And you're better off than most. You're practically there. I do not think that, if we just get to 100%, it's going to make sense. Insane. So stabilization fund, you had, went down a little bit, but that was totally, we talked about that. That was totally predicted. And then pension, you're part of Essex Regional. I'll talk about the numbers, but I do want you to look, just because it makes sense with what you were talking about earlier. If you look at the pension schedule, page 86, you now have your share of Essex Regional Retirement System's unfunded pension liabilities, $15 million. Again, they had a good year too. That was measured as of 12/23, so they measure everything as of December 31st. So your portion of Essex Regional is 3.44%, your $15 million. So that liability has went down from the year before, but certainly keeps going up. It's the pension liabilities are not doing as well as your OPEB liabilities, but that's your share. They do the same thing that you do, but on a much larger level, that they have an actuary come in, measure everything, and then allocate it out based on your payroll. It's based on your payroll numbers. And your contributions to Essex Regional, there's 10 years worth on page 87. So back in 2015, you were paying in $821,000 a year. You're up to $1.6 million a year.
Double it in 10 years.
Yes. And that, again, they have a responsibility to be fully funded. They're on a funding schedule to do that. And if you flip it and look on page 89, this is the OPEB. So these are the numbers Dan was talking about. I did have it open. We agree with his numbers. What did he say? 68.96% funded. But this goes from 2017 to 2024, and you'll see your liability, your net OPEB liability is that $2,053,233.
Mm-hmm.
The top part of this is the liability, the total liability. The middle part is your fiduciary net position. That's the real money that you have invested in PRIT. So you went from 2017, you had $1.4 million in PRIT. You are now up to $4.6 million in PRIT. And that directly offsets that liability. So it's a good situation. And it's remeasured every 2 years. Like you said, you'll have a new valuation next year. They'll look, it's all based on how many people you hire, right? So if you add a new department and start hiring a bunch of people, your OPEB liability is going to go up. Manchester tends to not, you don't have many employees, you pretty much stay the course with that. And taking the school out of the equation helps. You didn't have any new debt this year, so you were just paying down debt. Your total debt was $0.7 million. Debt service was relatively low, less than 2% of your budget. I know there was talk about what you're going to have to borrow coming up.
Was this FY25?
This is FY24.
And is there a maximum amount of debt that we're supposed to have?
Yeah.
I've heard a 10% number, but I don't know if that's the amount of the debt or the debt repayment.
So they say, right, so there's sort of this general, you should have a policy and you should know what you're borrowing for, but they say if you start going over like 10% of your operating budget, is that going to take so much of your operating budget that it's eating away, right? So we have restrictions with Prop 2.5 on how much you can spend on other things. Now, if the debt's exempt from Prop 2.5, then that really doesn't come into play.
Is the debt service that's measured against the budget? I'm trying to get
your debt service against the budget. But it depends on if it's exempt debt, right? So the whole problem there is if it's not exempt debt and you have to start creeping up on how much of your operating budget is going towards debt service, you're taking away from the police department, fire department, DPW.
Naive question, what's exempt?
It's if you vote to exclude it from Proposition 2.5.
Which is what we do.
Like capital
That's a
exclusion.
debt exclusion, which
debt
we
exclusion.
most commonly do. So what's an example of the alternative?
If you didn't exclude it, then it goes against your Proposition 2.5 limit, your levy limit. So you can only raise your taxes 2.5% plus your new growth unless you've exempted that debt.
Is that a different municipal process?
No, you typically exempt all of your debt.
Okay.
That's why you don't know the difference. But if
Okay.
you could have projects that the town decides to do within the limit.
So if we do the cash exclusion,
Right.
but that's excluded also.
Yep.
If it wasn't excluded, then
So for example, we go and build a new water plant and the debt service is part of our annual budget.
of the
That's-
2.5.
That's what
Yeah.
we're talking about
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
So is that it creeps up, it's an ongoing till that's paid off.
But I don't think we've ever issued
Why would
debt
you
that's
ever-
not
Why
exclusion.
would
So
you
10%
not
rule is
exclude
not
it? Well, give me the other
Keep the
side.
taxes down,
Taxes down.
because all of the debt exclusion we do for the bond repayment increases the tax rate over the 2.5% for the life of the project.
Right.
Whereas if you include it in the 2.5, your tax rate
Oh.
increase is only 2.5.
Yes, yeah.
So somebody,
Unless you do an override, which is not limited, an override that increases increase permanently.
An
not just for the
operating
project.
override. You can do an operating override.
Oh, operating override.
But so typically, that's what it's not eating into anything else. So if the town needs to build a new water treatment plant, they vote to exempt it from Proposition 2.5.
Yeah.
You go borrow the money you need, you're just raising more in taxes to fund that. But that's the math of it. Other funds, other than the general fund, you had some other major funds. Obviously, we talked a little bit about the CPA fund. You had $540,000 in revenue. You're taking in revenue both from the state trust fund and extra that you're voting to add to the taxes to be able to spend on those specific projects. You spent $568,000 of the CPA money. Federal, state, and other grants, that major fund. Again, ARPA, so we're drawing down the end of ARPA. We'll be happy when ARPA goes away. ARPA's been a big conversation for a long time, but we're getting to the end of ARPA. Everything had to be committed by December. Last December has to be spent, money out the door by 12/31/26. So you still have a little bit of money left to spend in ARPA, $317,000. And then your water and sewer enterprise fund. So in your financial statements, the enterprise funds are always full accrual. So when you're looking at that, this is not budgetary based for the enterprise funds. It always is including any debt that they are repaying and all of the capital assets. So your water and sewer funds, we expect stay somewhat, other than big changes maybe in OPEB or pension, we expect them to stay relatively the same, right? You're budgeting to charge rates to recover 100% of the costs. What happened this year is they went up, and it was because you had a contribution in from the general fund for, I think it was some water. And we've talked about stabilization, we've talked about free cash in your general fund balance. We did not issue a management letter this year. I will say we haven't had new comments for the past several years. The only two comments that were in there last year that we looked into and considered, there's two things. One of them is the fuel card. So if we've talked about the fuel card for years, since 2018, we've told you, there's been no significant change, but it doesn't look like there's going to be a significant change. It's not material. We have to look at the financial statements as a whole. It's not material to the financial statements. Really, the big things with that is people are they're not keeping track of the cards very well. And then water and sewer receivables. We've been reporting that one since 2022. And not big numbers. They're not material numbers, but you do have some old receivables under water and sewer that could be cleaned up. Not material to the financial statements, but water sewer receivables are an easy cleanup for communities. There's easy ways to get away from them. You can either lien them on the tax bill, or you can shut water off to force collection on those. We were just reporting to you that there's some older balances out there. Andrea is well aware of them. They know about them. They're working on them. And so there was nothing that we needed to put in writing. There were no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies.
Those payables, those receivables?
The receivables, they were not material. I don't know if the numbers went down or
I
not.
was wondering if there was any improvement.
I think that there was a big one outstanding from the antique table
No, okay.
that the landlord had to pay. And I believe that there was an issue at Cargo Unlimited, and that had to be cleaned up to close to sell the building.
And usually, right, so that's if a property is going to transfer, you usually would get your payment because someone's motivated
Put a lien on the
to pay
property.
the bill.
Yes.
But
To put a lien on the property or something to collect that bill, right?
You can.
Well, effectively, we've done it by the closing of the.
Yeah, I don't know what went on at Antique Tape, but it was a mess. That's all. Landlord was stuck holding the bag.
And again, we talked about this, but management's responsibilities, the report is all the town's responsibility. Our responsibility is to give our opinion at the beginning of it. But to do that, we have to make sure that we are assessing your risks, looking at your internal controls. There was nothing that we noted that we had to report to you. The town is also responsible for making all financial information available to us. We come in and sort of dig through your ledgers. We get a detailed copy of the ledger. We make sure we're looking at adjustments that are being made, really assessing any unusual adjustments that are being made. So anything outside the normal course of how you're recording your revenue and your receipts and how you're paying your warrants and paying your bills. And there was nothing that we found during that process. Talk about our responsibilities and the emphasis. The emphasis is to make sure that these reports are accurate, to make sure that you're implementing new accounting standards. We've had GASB 100 didn't impact you. The one new standard that came into play this year, and a couple of new ones coming up in the future. Nothing that we think will be of significance.
Always changing it.
All good stuff.
So is
Renee, if
anyone,
I was to build on Maury's comment about looking forward, I'd like to look forward for a second instead of backwards, about the borrowing, because I think it's fair to say we see a significant amount of capital activity going forward. My question is one of opinion, which is, as we go, that's a bit of a transition in terms of substantial borrowings quite a bit over the next fairly lengthy period. Any observations that we should be thinking of in terms of?
No, and you're talking about water sewer plants, is that based?
Buildings, building projects.
Sewer
Facilities.
School.
Infrastructure, school.
So right now, your debt is pretty low. Your debt service is pretty low. There's a chart in here that will show you when all your debt service is going to get paid off.
Where do I look?
In the big book,
Yes.
page 62 and 63. So your annual debt service, there's general obligation bonds and some direct borrowing, but really 2033, the general obligation bonds are paid off 2037. And you can see your total payments go down from now till then. But all that's going to happen when you borrow, if it's exempt debt, is you're going to raise more every year in property taxes.
Yeah.
And you're going to make those debt service payments. So because you're exempting it from Prop 2.5, that's all that's going to happen. Not going to impact anything else. And it's if you're looking at the town overall, it's a good thing because then you're going to have some new pretty buildings and some new infrastructure, and you don't want to delay that, right? There's sort of a theory that you don't want to delay all of your infrastructure because then eventually it has to happen, and it's better to have it happen on your schedule when you plan for it than by surprise. But if you're exempting it, it won't impact your operations, your finances. Really, you need to worry about that if you're not exempting it, and then all of your debt service is impacting other departments.
And looking forward a little bit, obviously some changes going on in Washington. Do you anticipate any of that affecting 25, 26, these years coming up, and how you would be presenting to us maybe in a year from now, or?
It's very hard to know.
Yeah.
I wish I had a crystal.
Like
I wish I
daily.
had a crystal, but here's what I can tell you. Really, in Manchester, what you're relying on, like I don't think motor vehicle is gonna. Well, we'll see, right? We'll see, unless car prices are so crazy that people aren't buying cars, and then your motor vehicle revenue goes down.
during COVID.
Didn't. No one did, right? Everyone thought they were going to,
Yeah.
and nobody did. People still got their excise bills. People still paid their excise bills. But your real estate revenue is guaranteed, pretty much guaranteed. I don't see the value of your homes going down. I think you're not relying like some communities do on that much federal and state funding. So I don't think it will have as big an impact on you as it could with some larger some larger
It's-
cities that really kind of rely on that and need that money to operate.
It's our grants for capital projects.
Yeah.
So we just have to issue more debt excluded.
Because the school works around in here too. Do you have any thoughts on that? Because indirectly that affects us.
Indirectly, that affects you. I mean, there could, right, so the Department of Education problems could impact the schools. Again, it would be, two things could happen. One is the grants would go away. If the grants go away, you're still responsible for special education costs, whether they're funded through grants or not. You have to pay for special education costs, so that would impact the school's budget. But a lot could happen. Like, there's just so many things that are being thrown out about Department of Education that it's hard to, I wish I had a crystal ball, hard to know. But yeah, there are some things with the schools, if they're not funded, they're just not gonna happen, like that program would go away, but not special ed. You are responsible for special
Wouldn't
ed.
special ed go away if they get rid of the Department of Education? Because that's a federal law. Special ed.
Would you not have to fund special education? I think you do still. I think you do.
Unless they take it away.
I think you're still gonna be responsible. It's, and those costs, I mean, we audit a lot of schools, those costs can fluctuate. Like, sometimes there's just sort of a lot of kids that move in that have a lot of special needs, that are high-cost needs, that are sort of out of district tuition type things. And then there are some years that they go up and down.
Right.
You know, we thought with COVID maybe that there would be, because kids were at home, kids were having problems. It hasn't like all happened at once, that there have been a big increase in special ed. Yeah, you are directly impacted by what happens at the school. You do have to fund them.
Any more questions that you know?
Yes, another forward-looking, this year I've noticed, some of the training budgets, are listed as training, but they include overtime salaries of the people. And I'm not sure if that has to be accounted for as salaries or, so we used to have a big overtime budget and a smaller training budget. And then this year they reduced the overtime budget.
No, but
Yes.
it's still
increasing.
paid as overtime. It's just recording
It's still a
how they're
salary though?
spending. It's done on the books as salaries, yes.
Yeah.
It's just for budget purposes,
It's called training.
right. But
Okay.
on the actual ledger, if somebody's doing training, they're being paid overtime, it's paid as overtime.
Would still
Right,
be
so
paid as
there's-
overtime.
yeah,
So it's
there's
just
no
a budget, it's
pension
where
and all
you're,
that.
no.
Yeah. It's just to better reflect
Okay, I just wanted to
where
double check.
overtime's required.
Some of the departments are doing it and some others aren't, so there's a little
Yep,
inconsistency. too.
that's not how they're being paid, that's how you're budgeting.
Yes, yeah, yep. So that was one. The other one, was, have you looked at how to keep track of harbor rate? Right now, there's like this big dock and they charge people who show up. And like sometimes the harbor master will let a resident just hang out there for an hour and other times it's charged. So, how do we monitor that income? How do we control it?
I will say, have I looked at it here?
Have we
No.
gotten into it yet?
We haven't gotten into that in
Yeah.
that much detail, because it's not that significant
That's
to your
gonna be a
financial
tricky one.
statements. I will say, it is tricky. There are, if the harbor master lets someone come in for a couple of hours, any audit it's gonna be really tough to find that in an audit.
Right.
What happens, because we do a lot of coastal communities that have pretty big harbors, and definitely mooring revenue or the slip revenue
That's easy.
is because there's so many spots and
Right.
and it's easier to audit. There's a list
Yes.
of boats, there's the length of the boat, there's the rate, and you can kind of see if all the revenue's there. But if someone's coming in and not being charged,
But
unless I
there's-
sat
yeah.
there all day, like, it would be really difficult to look at.
This is a transient boating, so it's not a fixed number.
And the
So,
transients, yeah, I mean, they'll have logs of them. They should be treating everybody equally.
Yeah,
But unless you really scoured through those logs, it would be,
it's just coming up.
But from a revenue side, I mean, I think we're using DocWa, so it's being recorded by a third party who's taking a bit of that, and then it's coming to the town as a revenue item that could be audited. So I don't think it's cash taking, happening down
That's
the
not like
dock.
the beach.
It's
but are they not
No, it's just a
recording?
matter of
Are they
keeping
not
track.
recording some people? So if you have a transient boat coming in, or some people
Right.
not going through the system, that would be the what could go wrong. is you didn't charge somebody that you should have.
Right.
Anything else for me?
Anything else for Renee?
Thank you, no.
No,
All
thank
right.
you very much.
Thank you
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you, guys. Good luck with your budget discussion.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
This person that was not here, do you want me to leave these?
Yeah. He likes paper. Okay. So we have some budget issues to do. The first issue is OPEB, which is on page 2 of today's handout. It's printed double-sided, so it's on the back of the first page. So last year, in 2025, we budgeted 300,000.
Right.
This year, there's 330,000. And based on this schedule that Dan Sherman gave, is he showed the 2025 of 300, the 2026 of 330, 2027 of 360, and then 2028 at 144, 321, which would fully fund it if we earned the 7.5% interest. And so, do we want to approve the 330,000?
Yes.
I'll make a motion to approve 330,000 for OPEB trust funding.
A second?
Peter seconds. Any discussion? Take a vote. Dean?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Maury?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Sarah votes yes. Gar, are you on?
Yes,
You vote yes for the OPEB?
I do.
Did you have your hand raised. Did you have anything else?
No,
I hope you didn't have a question for the auditor because she's gone.
no, I didn't have a question. I was raising my hand to vote yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Then, the other thing we did not vote on was emergency management. It's page 23, I think. Kind of little numbers. So we talked about this.
It is 26. Yep.
And this was the dispatch is going to start paying for the reverse 911. And so they asked to increase the budget by 6,000. Anybody remember why?
No.
I'm a little confused.
Shucks.
I don't.
We
Something's
just,
going down by 6 and something's going up by 6.
right, we discussed it with the fire chief.
Yes, we did.
Oh.
Oh, it looks like I have a thing from the fire. Let's see if I have. That's the deputy option.
Might be the page we're on again here.
23.
23.
23.
Do you want me to jump in?
Please, Jake.
For the Deputy Chief Fitzgerald, the emergency manager, it still falls under the fire department budget historically.
Yeah.
As a separate account. The thought process is emergency management. We're starting to work cohesively with a lot of our Cape Ann neighbors in trying to bring on our volunteers, create a volunteer corps,
Oh, that's right.
and get that back up and running. So that money is just being reallocated from reverse 911 in order to help us fund the training sessions and outfit the volunteers.
Nice to have people help out if
And that falls under the title of EM expenses, right?
emergency
Yes,
management.
management.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's in Zero net change, just
Right,
Pockets. You want motion?
a motion to approve the 7,500? The emergency,
Oh, well, then I'm looking at the wrong thing. I thought,
total expenses of 7,500.
So moved.
I'll second it.
sorry, but I'm looking at 6,000.
That's a delta from the year
No,
before.
move over one column to the
Oh,
left.
I'm looking at the wrong column. Sorry,
Okay.
yep,
7,500.
yep, 75.
Any discussion? Take a vote. Dean,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Maury,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Tom,
yes.
Gar.
Yes.
Great, thanks.
Sarah says.
And Sarah says yes.
I had a comment on the fire report that we just got, on how, one of the firefighter is leaving this month. So, I mean, we're gonna have this vacant position all year. Would that enable the deputy to be hired a little earlier because he's
No.
leaving so soon? I mean,
No,
it's
I
just
mean,
a thought.
they have a posting to replace that firefighter.
Okay,
They're trying to hire somebody so
right,
that.
I know, but in the
so that
meantime.
In the meantime, we'll
backfill
save
the
on the
overtime.
salary line, but we'll pay in the overtime
Right.
line.
But we are gonna try to run a 3-person shift with as opposed to calling overtime for the 4th, right?
Yeah, that's what he's been doing all year.
Yes, okay. All right, well, I was just thinking that,
Okay.
that salary not paying earlier.
We sort of budget for slots, full-time equivalents as opposed to individual names.
Yeah.
So it's basically,
It just seemed like him leaving and then us hiring a admin is kind of like what we were thinking of doing, what I was thinking of doing initially, but. All
Now,
right. I don't know.
the other thing I wanted to circle back around on was the capital budget we approved. And the reason I wanted to circle back around is because when I looked at it, I realized that one of the line items that we've had a lot of discussion about, but was included in the final capital budget we approved, was the boat storage structure
Oh, I forgot about that.
Oh, you are,
for
thank
the
you.
harbor,
Thank you. Yes, yes,
for 50,000.
yes.
And so I just want to know is, do we want to fund that or not, or do we want to revise our vote? It's being paid out of harbor fund.
But remind me, it was a structure that was going to be potentially temporary,
Like one of those hoop structures with the plastic covering.
and then what was it gonna be used for once the boat was stored elsewhere? DPW, right?
I
No,
don't think they had a good
they
answer
didn't
for
have a
that.
plan.
I think it would get trashed, probably.
No, we sort of said that, given the DPW building discussion, we would pass on this.
I think that's.
A year or two more in the snow
I
and
thought
wind
that's
is not
what
gonna
we-
kill us.
That's what I thought we discussed too.
Yeah, we were a little suspect of the.
Brian
idea.
didn't want to shrink wrap it or something.
I think he was trying to get away from shrink wrapping
I
Yeah,
think so.
for some reason.
The annual cost.
but I think it was more an environmental thing.
I don't know.
Oh, yeah, they recycle.
But
that
you can
stuff.
put a tarp over it too, a
Yeah.
reusable tarp. It isn't
Right.
$50,000.
I mean, if push came to shove, you could probably rent space up on Atwater Avenue or someplace like that and
Yeah.
put the boats in there. I mean, it would be a little odd, but
Do you have thoughts on this, Gar?
My feeling is, there are lots of, as Maury said, there are a lot of alternative options here. And, just using a creative approach, it doesn't seem like to me that it's a a consonant moving experience. So I would hope that we could find a reasonable solution to this.
Yeah, I don't disagree with the idea of getting away from, like having to throw away all that plastic every year. I guess I kind of get that, but there are storage facilities.
I mean, I think if we think the DPW thing through, wherever that ends up in the next 5, 7, 8 years.
Yeah.
There could be a cinder block extension for current boats and room for 30% more if we thought that through. I think one of the challenges is that it would be good to get the whole harbor revenue expenditure thing. It seems to be a lots of
Yes.
comings and goings, and, we sort of vote on one thing and have expectations about one thing, and then the next year it's kind of like, well, this is great, well, where's the money? Well,
Generally,
Isn't our intent
yeah.
that that fund should build up to support dredging and other things?
Yeah, I mean,
I
there's
don't
certainly
feel as
lots of
though
uses
we
for
keep
it.
expending it.
yeah, exactly.
I would like not to approve 50,000.
Okay, so we need to revote the capital budget.
One other, it might affect, the CPC, I talked with Jack. He said that they could probably go up to 200,000 for the tucks. I know we were looking at 250 and then it was
We were looking
140.
for 200, and what Jack said to Greg is 140, and so
Right.
that's what was supposed to be on the meeting for tomorrow night.
Right, and I was talking with him today, and he thought with some accounting. Jack's hands up. There
Hi,
you
Jack.
go.
Good evening, everybody. Jack Burke, CPC. I spent some time going over the existing projects with Andrea, and we never recredited our funds, about $70,000 from the abandoned project at the Memorial School, the sawmill project. So it's still on the books. If Andrea pulls that back, in addition to the 140,000 that's there, I should be able to do another 60 and come up with an additional 200,000, making the CPC budget for the rotunda 500,000 rather than 300,000.
If that helps.
And we're meeting tomorrow night to vote that.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's what I think we were looking for.
And not to overcomplicate this kind of comes back to the meeting the other night, our last meeting, on Rotunda, right?
I don't know what you're referring to.
Aren't we pulling more money from reserves?
800,000.
Yeah, but that was assuming we got the 500 from CPC.
Or 550, but now it's 5.
800 plus 500, 1.3.
1.3.
Is that the total number?
Which
Yeah.
is 200.
2.3.
We lost $1 million.
2.25.
I'm just wondering if we have more funds available than we thought we had with
Oh,
CPC.
I'm saying
pullback.
with the cost of the time. 2.3.
Funds available where?
So we were originally budgeting for CPC on the Rotunda for an amount of 140, right? And what other funds?
No, we had 200.
We were originally
No, we had
300,000,
300,000,
Originally.
right,
300,000
right,
from
right.
CPC.
and now we
Yep.
can add
Now we're
200.
adding 200 to get
Okay.
to 5,
Got it, okay.
and we were, so with that additional 200 from CPC, and then 800,000 from reserve,
Right,
And that's-
which is in the budget, this capital budget.
So does that dynamic affect any vote that we've already taken?
No, we voted on that 800,000.
Right.
We're gonna have to re-vote CPC
Once they do their.
once they do their thing, so we'll do
Okay.
that on the 19th.
Okay.
And Dean will let us know if they approve it,
Okay.
okay?
Yeah.
And then if we can, I'll do the report assuming we're gonna approve it.
prove it.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Great, thanks, Jack.
You're welcome.
Okay,
Are there other, I'm just going down the capital
okay,
budget
yep.
here. Are there other changes? I'm trying to be sure I understand any other changes besides the ones you just discussed. I'm not,
So we voted on the budget and made lots of changes.
yes,
And those are all in
they're all in here.
this spreadsheet through 227.
In red, which is very helpful. Thank you, Andrea.
So we've already approved
Everything else.
this one we have, which was the the 4215875.
So we're talking about amending this to make it 4165.
875, right.
875.
And to delete the boat storage structure,
Right.
50,000 from the total capital and 50,000 from harbor funds, so harbor funds would be only 15,000. So I'll make a motion
I'll second.
that
You're free to vote whatever you want.
we're revising our vote on the capital budget by reducing it by 50,000 for the boat storage structure, which will bring total capital down to $4,165,875. The amount from taxation, fund balance, reappropriation, and sewer will remain unchanged, but the harbor funds will decrease from 65,000 to 15,000.
Second.
Andy seconds.
I
Any
have a
discussion?
question.
Yes,
Because my memory can't remember, what's happening to the boat purchase, the grant, the $400,000 boats that we're thinking of here?
It's in there.
It's in there.
And it's in here for,
It's
115.
116.
is that what that is? I find that small. Okay,
Yeah,
116.
it should have been
It's like
landscaped.
seed money for a grant.
Yes, I
We're gonna
understand.
be paying this much in maintenance.
You
in
give
10
it a nice
years.
word, you
But
call it
that's a-
seed money.
That's another
There's
discussion.
another word I would like to use, but, okay. Okay, thank you, I've got it.
and we're okay with that expenditure?
I'm okay with it. I think it raises our standard really incredibly, but.
I'll just miss the orange boat. And we're okay with the shellfish study?
Yes.
Okay. Any more discussion? Take a vote. Dean,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Maury,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Gar,
Yes.
and Sarah votes yes. Okay. And I will let Andrea know. Andrea couldn't make this meeting because the summer stomach bug for her kids came to her.
It was a good time.
Okay, so the other thing, oh, I'm sorry.
All right.
I thought you were looking at my printed copy.
No, I never would.
This wasn't the one I issued. Where am I? Oh, fine. So the other thing we have not voted on is the school. But I think we can vote on the North Shore Agricultural and Technical School.
Yeah.
Which was
Where's that?
page 26. It was originally, the original budget we received, it was 250-odd thousand. In this budget, as at 176,418, the reduction is due to a decrease in enrollment from 13 to 8. 176,418.
And do we know if, is 8 the minimum?
No,
that we have to-
5,
Okay.
Yeah.
which we paid for many years. I'm surprised it's
Right.
decreased so much.
I know. Well, it may be competition from other districts.
Yeah.
And they have to apply, you know.
Right, they're talking about changing the way to do it. So I have a motion to approve $176,418 for the North Shore Agricultural and Technical School.
So
Yes.
move.
Second,
Yes.
Peter, second. Any discussion? Vote. Dean,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Maury,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Gar,
Yes.
Sarah votes yes. Okay. And the school will wait till the 19th. Because the school is approving their budget on the 18th. I don't know what happened at last night's meeting. I didn't attend it. So I think that is all of,
Is that everything except the schools?
yes. And I did talk to Andrea about revenue projections.
Okay.
And what we kind of decided on, other people agree, is to make the revenue assumptions at the discretion of the finance director, but not less than 95% of the prior completed fiscal, unless there's a documented reason to have it otherwise. Does that
Sounds like.
And that
Makes
gets added
sense.
to our so-called financial policy. I'm a little troubled, we still have that and not in finance. Yeah, okay.
I know.
But I think our challenge has always been we understate revenues and they come in high.
I mean, the other,
95% of.
is that too low?
No, I think that's reasonable.
Okay.
I mean, I would say it should be a little higher, but that's just
You've
me.
got
But she can do it higher, and
Right.
when we went through it, we went through all of the revenue projections. And, she had reasons for why they were off.
Mhm.
Like the payments in lieu of taxes. She had to decrease it by 500 because there was a change in the max that could be charged, and there's 2 payments in lieu of taxes. The investment income
We talked about.
we've talked about.
Mhm.
And so her estimates were higher than the 95%.
Mhm.
Well, what I like about your policy is that you give it a relief valve. If
Yeah,
there's a reason, it can be expressed.
Right.
right.
Yeah.
Yes, it gives flexibility.
So do I have a vote to support that?
Yes.
I make the motion, I need a second.
Second.
Need a second. Vote,
Yes,
Dean,
yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Yes.
Lori, Peter.
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Gar,
Yes.
and Sarah votes yes. Okay. Now, Dean, did you have something else that you wanted to bring up that I wouldn't let you discuss earlier?
No,
Okay.
we get kind of flushed out with all
Okay,
the CPC.
okay. So I think we're good on the budget. I will work on a streamlined report.
I like the word streamline.
Yeah.
I like it.
Warrant articles, we don't have to talk about till later on down the road. It doesn't sound like there's too much financial related.
Warrant articles, we'll have to do 319.
Yep.
Right,
I'm going to be away.
okay. So hopefully you can help us again with SharePoint
Oh, sure, yeah.
on the report. So then at least if that's completed before the 19th, you'll have been able to give your input.
Yeah.
I think we can actually wait till the next week,
The
but,
main question or comment I had about last year's was the use of specialized terms
okay,
and the fact whether people understand what they mean.
okay,
Maybe I'm oversensitive to that, but there are quite a few terms we throw around here that I don't think the general population.
So the book does have a glossary.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, or a
well, then it's gotta be
terminology
more
list.
explicit about sending you to it, because
Right.
it's awfully easy to read it and then not be sure what it truly is saying to you.
okay.
You're right, Maury, it does, and that needs to be referenced.
Okay.
And I love the word streamline, because I think
It's too much.
Yeah,
It's
it's-
too repetitive. I think what I'd like to do is a lot more bullets.
yes.
You can always have
Yes.
appendices.
Yeah,
I'm very enthusiastic about that.
yeah. You know, we kind of carried it forward a lot from year to year. I think it makes sense to have a lot less about the school budget.
Yep.
Um,
Because we play a much different role with respect to it.
Right. And we don't really have much control over the budget. Let them explain their budget. It's
Exactly.
kind of,
We vote up or down
The
yeah,
big
on
thing
operating in debt, period.
is the discussion about adding the government, all the increases in the government. Like, and outline why
what
we
are you
did that
talking about, increases in government?
in the government department. Yeah.
The salary increases, yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Another game there.
Yeah.
We made a lot of.
Yeah.
government
Staff and
structural
full-time
changes.
equivalents, the impact.
Well, there also were a lot of increases to existing employees, you know. And
I think the long-term capital plan, maybe it doesn't need to get into the specifics of Greg's whole spreadsheet, but the fact that there is a longer year.
I was wondering about including it.
Yep,
I mean, as such.
Well, we'll just have to be careful with the numbers that we're reporting.
Okay,
Yeah.
You should see social media blow up.
I
okay.
think
Yeah,
there's
I-
a fine line, though. I do think that we need to, when we start talking about long-term multi-year planning, I think we need to put revision numbers on things. Because we all sit here in '23 and go, that sounds good. In
Yeah.
'24, the long-term
We
plan is
didn't get the
different.
version 4.1.
New document.
I mean, maybe just say something generic about we've
I
done
think
it out to fiscal year 50 and the increase in the tax range, tax rate ranges from 0% to X% for any given year.
I think
Right.
noting we have it,
Yeah,
we're looking at it, and it's subject to quite a bit of change. It makes a couple of assumptions being, capitals that we're spending, kinds of projects that we're spending it on, and the people can expect there will be in a range of X to Y, the kinds of increases we're going to be faced with from year to year. I'm very fearful of including that
Okay.
schedule.
It's a
Okay.
communication issue.
Yeah,
I mean, you can really.
it's going to be hard to reel it back.
Well, plus,
I think just noting there's strategy that Greg was talking about, I think is a good one to
Yes, I do.
present.
I mean, it would be important to remind everyone that this is a sample of what we know. And that there's often a lot of stuff that comes up that we don't know. that
well,
may-
I don't think we want to go into.
No, I know, but I mean, just
Yeah.
saying that
Yeah.
that's something that
Yeah.
you might need to build in as well.
Well, I just think if we say we've looked at potential projects through fiscal year 50.
Right.
And
Yeah.
determine that the impact.
I think a more controlled
The
communication.
impact on the tax rate in any given year doesn't exceed X%, and in many years it's 0%.
And I think the communication on particular projects and all that needs to be handled by a team that's dedicated to that
Doesn't that go through Tiffany?
and ready to field that.
Did Tiffany do stuff like that?
And with respect to Sherman's report, OPEB and the auditor, you just have a sentence or so in there, I mean, because that's all worth, I think, a little comment.
No, the select board
Oh,
is charged with
With
putting
that.
the OPEB in there, in the financial report.
and who comments on the auditor's review and conclusion?
It doesn't go in there.
It doesn't, we don't say that the town is,
I don't know what we've said before.
I just think that what we've heard tonight is very useful in the
Yeah.
matter of building confidence
Yeah.
about what the town, and
Yeah,
including Maury's question as we look forward to years where we're going to be drawing heavily on capital
Well,
borrowing.
then, yeah, she referenced that our debt is relatively low.
I do think referencing the auditors and that we have sat down and talked with them is encouraging
okay.
and reinforcing to the taxpayers.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sure anybody else in this,
No,
any other volunteer boards are doing that. I think it is kind of our job. And probably also OPEB too. There might be people who say, why spend this or why not clear it all off in one year? And I think we've all thought about that.
Just leave
Yeah,
off
I
the
think we
fuel
should
cards.
go
Opine on that.
Leave off the what?
The fuel cards.
Yeah,
Okay, anything else? Okay. We have minutes.
3, right?
We have all of February to adopt, or is that, or all?
We have the 5th, the 12th.
Now, the 5th was approved and seconded, but we never took a roll vote. Does that mean it's not approved? I mean, Gail was saying it that we have to do something special.
No, she's saying we voted on it.
Yeah, well, we didn't take the roll.
But did we amend them?
Well, that's what happened. Sarah mentioned it, Andy moved to approve them, someone seconded them, and then before I could even say I had comments, I
Oh,
think we dropped it then
I
and
see.
didn't do a roll
Didn't carry it.
call.
I
So,
wasn't sure.
Right.
but I would, so,
Yeah,
I mean,
they need to be voted.
yeah, I think I'm fine with all three the way I want.
So,
make a
So-
motion to approve all minutes as
Yeah.
currently revised and stated.
Second.
any discussion?
Note the overwhelming discussion.
Take a vote.
Let's go,
Dean,
yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Gar.
Yes.
Fantastic.
That's February.
We're almost up to.
We don't have the ones from,
No, his motion was all of,
That's all.
Yes.
I thought we,
We just did three.
you just did all three.
Were you at
That was
all
your
three
motion,
meetings?
do we have some for the first?
no, we had another meeting
We
in
don't have the
February.
27th.
We had the
We don't
5th,
have
the
the
12th, and
27th.
the
We don't have
19th.
27th.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gail, for your work on this and your
Yes.
flexibility in dealing with changes.
Oh,
It's- She does a lot of work on this.
I know.
It's crazy.
So our next meeting is Wednesday, March 19th.
Right.
At which we will vote on the school budget. We will discuss the warrant articles. We'll vote on the warrant articles and we will,
Is there any chance we can see the draft warrant before the meeting? Or is that's driven by Greg? Just because it's, read it through. No. Who knows?
at the select board meeting, they were wondering how late they could go to approve it, and they wanted to wait and approve it sometime in April. And I said, well, it doesn't have to go in the financial report.
I heard your comment.
So I think,
Struggling to get it for our meeting.
I think that they have not yet made a determination on a warrant article for a bond for the senior center.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of the gist I got from that meeting.
It's just like,
And their next meeting is 16, 17. Yeah, so, okay. Anything else people want to raise? And we're fine with funding the school with unused levy capacity?
Yes.
Okay, okay. Okay, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Are you in favor, Gar?
I'm in favor.
Thank you.
Good night, Carl.
Good night, Gary.
Good night.
Good night.